الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان سيدنا ونبينا محمدا عبده ورسوله. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في القران المجيد بعد اعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وافوض امري الى الله. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. There's a principle in physics that pretty much everyone at some point in their life has studied, and that is that whenever there's a force applied in one direction, there's going to be an equal and opposite force in the opposite direction. So for instance, if there is a wall and I'm trying to push against the wall, right, the same pressure that I'm exerting on the wall is going to exert back onto me. It's a natural principle that is one of the Newton's laws. We know this, right? It's established. And in a physical sense, it makes sense. We understand it. For instance, if there is something coming toward me and I want to stop it, I try to block it. I resist it. In fact, it's called resistance in physical terminology. It's resistance. And to the physical body, when there's resistance, there's often a stress placed upon it. And if there's too much resistance that you're trying to apply to a force that's perhaps stronger than you, eventually you will fatigue. It'll create a stress on your physical body. Maybe you'll become injured. Versus if you just let go, then that force carries on however it needs to carry on. Now what's interesting is when we apply this to the spiritual and to the psychological dimension as well, relatively the same principle applies. In our deen, we know that Allah Ta'ala is in charge of the universe. And He decrees whatever He wants to decree. It's up to Him. Right? What we want has no bearing on what He wants. Meaning what we think is good for ourselves, that doesn't alter Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala's command and hukm. Right? Allah Ta'ala is truly in charge. In fact, when He mentioned in the Quran, وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ, that the attitude of a believer is that I relegate my matters to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Because if we don't relegate our matters to Allah, and we're constantly trying to push back and provide resistance to the direction that Allah Ta'ala is taking, then we become fatigued, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It comes in both Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Some of you may have heard it. It's often called the hadith of the three infants who spoke, or the three children that spoke. In that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ talks about Isa alayhi salam. There were three infants in history, in human history, that spoke. Isa alayhi salam as another person, and then further down in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ talks about a third child. And that child was suckling from his mother. He was nursing. Young infant, baby. So the mother was nursing the child once, and in front of them came you can say a horseman. It was like a knight. He looked very well off, very well kept, very noble, right? Came in like on a really nice horse and started going across. You know, you could say someone who, let's say, drives into the parking lot with a really fancy car. Somebody comes with a Ferrari, everyone's going to turn their head and look at them and say, wow, they must have X, Y, and Z things. Right? He or she must have achieved X, Y, and Z things in life. This is why they are who they are right now, who we see right now. So the mother, and looking at this man, just like any mother desires for her child to be successful, she made a dua. And her dua was that may you be like this person. May you be like him. She made dua to Allah that, oh Allah, may my child be like him. So then the infant responded. And Prophet ﷺ actually depicts this. And Abu Hurairah who narrates how the Prophet ﷺ actually depicts it with his fingers, how the child came off of his mother. And then the child comes off of his mother whom he was suckling from. And he said, may I not be like him. May I not be like him. Right? And so it's like the complete opposite. Why would the child try to oppose the dua of the mother? The mother, in seeing this apparently good figure in front coming by, she just desires that her child become like that person. So some time goes by, and the child and the mother, again, she's suckling the son. The son is suckling from the mother. And perhaps you could say that's the closest the mother and child ever come, right? Even in life, any mother can attest to this. So she's suckling the child, and there's this scene, there's this big commotion. There's a big crowd of people, and they're around this lady, young woman. And so the circumstance that comes in hadith is that young woman was someone who committed a major sin, who was accused of committing sin, and was accused of theft, of stealing. So all the commotion of the crowd around her was, taunting her for this. They were taunting her for this. So the mother, in seeing this scene, said, may you not be like her. Made dua, oh Allah, may my son not be like her. Apparently and outwardly, evil. And so then the infant replied, oh Allah, make me like her. Make me like her. This is a very lengthy hadith, right? And there's so many lessons that are taken from this. Later on, the mother then asked the child, why is it that when I made dua for you to become like this noble, outwardly and apparently good-looking figure, you made dua that you don't be like him, and then when we saw this woman who apparently or outwardly appeared to be wretched because of the things that she did, you made dua that you not be like her even though I wanted you to be like, you made dua that you be like her even though I wanted you to not be like her. So the child then responds and says that person who was coming across this person was a tyrant. Right? And that woman who was being accused, she didn't commit any sin, nor was she a thief. And she was making dua that, oh Allah, you are the best of our representatives. Right? So she was actually an innocent person who was being taunted by society when she had done nothing wrong, and the person who was outwardly was a tyrant, one that she had made dua for. And so the scholars took many interpretations from this, and the main one that is very apparent to us is that those things that apparently appear to be good for us may not be good for us. And those things that apparently appear to be harmful for us, we don't know if they're actually harmful for us or not. Only Allah knows. The reality is we know very little about anything. We know very little about anything. Now the Quran and the Sunnah, they teach us that whenever we're making a decision for something, that we have to follow certain steps. For instance, we want to purchase a home, we have to do a little bit of research. We want to marry someone, we have to do our research. But ultimately, we don't know if, for instance, marriage to that person is necessarily going to be a good outcome for us or a bad outcome for us. How can we predict what happens in 15 or 20 years? How can we predict that this house that I absolutely want to buy, I've done my research, it looks great, it's a perfect house, and now you're waiting to see if this will be yours, you put an offer down, right? We don't know. Maybe that house will catch fire in 5 years, and then your whole life will be destroyed. Maybe you'll move into that house and then your children will pass away because of some event that occurs there. We don't know. Maybe you'll marry someone who you thought was the person of your dreams and you find out a few years later that they have bizarre addictions. Outwardly, we don't know a circumstance. We do what we can to do our research because that's what the Quran and the Sunnah teach us. But ultimately, we should recognize that really only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Now, bringing this back full circle, I said at the beginning that there are forces in the universe. And when we try to resist those, it creates stress and tension. And we often see this in our lives, right? We can take the example, for instance, the current situation we're in. And many people are very stressed by the circumstance, right? It's like, when is it going to end? I had this wedding planned this summer. Initially, they said I could do it in April. Then they said I could do it in July. And now it's August, and we're pushing back against this natural force, right? Some people, everyone has their own circumstance, but you can see society in a whole is just struggling, thinking why, and when. But if we as believers recognize that Allah Ta'ala is in charge, and rather than push back with resistance, we let go. We let go and we say, Ya Allah, you know what's best. Ya Allah, grant us ease and goodness, but whatever is khair, Ya Allah, that comes from you. And you know what is best for us. we take a step back, then what happens is the human being becomes de-stressed. Right? The human being becomes de-stressed. And that's important in a time of extreme stress. So rather than constantly wondering why or when, rather appreciate that, look, one, Allah Ta'ala is in charge, right? Of my life and of all of our lives. We sometimes face calamities individually, in which case we're taught to be patient and accept whatever Allah Ta'ala has given us. And in certain cases, rare cases, human beings as a whole face a calamity and a difficulty. Right? So there's a force coming in that direction. Instead of us just pushing back and stressing ourselves, we ease up and just recognize that, Ya Allah, out of everything, I have now recognized that truly you are the one who's in charge. Whatever your hukum is, it happens. No one can stop it. No one can challenge it. No one can even understand it. You would think it's impossible for scientists to not be able to understand disease after an extended period of time. But it's right before our very eyes. Right? All of those things that we thought were true about something ends up not being true. You find out 3 or 4 weeks later it's the complete opposite. It's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows all and He hears all. The believer's attitude is, وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. I or we collectively relegate our matters to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَصِيرٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. He oversees every single one of us. So we should take this approach in general in life. We make dua for what's good. We do the research for what's important. But when it comes to our circumstances, when it comes to our individual circumstances, right, then we should be very mindful of the fact that Allah Ta'ala is in charge. And rather than always push back against the hukum of Allah, we accept what Allah Ta'ala's hukum is and see the serenity that enters into our life. So may Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala grant us all the tawfiq to appreciate this. May Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala allow us to become true servants of His. May Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala allow us to appreciate the teachings of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam through the hadith. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان سيدنا ونبينا محمدا عبده ورسوله. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في القران المجيد بعد اعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ان الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا ايها الذين امنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم في العالمين انك حميد مجيد. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ارحم امتي بامتي ابو بكر واشدهم في امر الله عمر واصدقهم حياء عثمان وارضاهم علي وفاطمه سيده نساء اهل الجنه والحسن والحسين سيدا شباب اهل الجنه وحمزه اسد الله واسد رسوله. اللهم اغفر للعباسي وولده مغفره ظاهره وباطنه لا تغادر ذنبا رضوان الله تعالى عليهم اجمعين. الله في اصحابي لا تتخذوهم غرضا من بعدي فمن احبهم فبحبي احبهم ومن ابغضهم فببغضي ابغضهم. اللهم اعز الاسلام والمسلمين اللهم انصر الاسلام والمسلمين. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الاخره حسنه وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين. اعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ان الله يامر بالعدل والاحسان وايتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. عباد الله اتقوا الله واذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولا ذكر الله تعالى اكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون.